Just because someone broke your heart does not mean that someone else cannot repair it. Pain doesn't last forever, and neither does heartbreak. It might feel impossible to trust again, but life has a way of surprising you. The right person will come along, not to fix you, but to show you that love is still real. Healing takes time, and it starts with believing that better days are ahead. Don't let one bad experience close your heart. Keep going, keep believing, and one day you'll realize your heart is whole again. And when that day comes, quietly, almost like a whisper slipping through the cracks of your weary soul, you won't even notice it at first. It will sneak up on you like sunlight through broken blinds, painting golden lines across scars you forgot you had. You'll laugh one day, suddenly, unexpectedly, in a way that doesn't feel forced or like you're trying to prove you're okay. And you'll pause, startled by the sound of your own joy, realizing it no longer tastes like salt water and memories you tried to drown. Because healing is deceptive like that. It doesn't knock on your door with a bouquet and an apology from the universe. No, it tiptoes in when you're elbow deep in ordinary moments. Grocery aisles, late night drives, or brushing your teeth with a song playing faintly in the background that doesn't hurt like it used to. The agony softens so slowly you don't even feel it unraveling. One day, the memories lose their sharpness, like photographs left too long in the sun. They blur, they fade, they stop shouting. But that doesn't mean the ache wasn't real. It was. It is. Some nights, it'll still press its cold hands against your ribs when you're trying to sleep. Some mornings, you'll wake up with an echo of their voice caught between your dreams and daylight. That's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't leave clean. It stains. It leaves fingerprints on your laughter and scribbles their name in margins they never had a right to write in. And yet somehow, in the mess of it all, you'll start to stitch yourself back together. Thread by trembling thread. You won't even know you're doing it. Maybe it's in the way you water your plants again, without thinking of the one who bought you that cactus and said, "You're like this, hard to love, but worth it." Maybe it's in how you stop checking your phone every 5 minutes, hoping for a message that was never coming. Maybe it's in forgiving yourself for the way you stayed, for the way you loved them like a burning house and still begged to be let inside. You'll meet people along the way who try to pull you back into pieces. They'll wear kindness like a mask and hand you compliments like grenades, pulling pins with pretty words, hoping you'll explode back into who you used to be. Don't fall for it. Protect your healing like it's sacred, because it is. You've walked through hell and kissed its flames. You earned every tender part of your recovery. And then, maybe when you least expect it, someone will come along with a smile that doesn't ask for anything in return. Their hands won't try to fix you because they'll see you're not broken, just bruised. A little bent maybe from all the storms you've survived, but still standing, still trying, still here. They'll listen without trying to fill the silence with solutions. They'll laugh in a way that feels like coming home. And your heart, your poor stitched up, aching heart, will flinch at first. Because it remembers, it always remembers, but little by little, it'll start to trust again. Not because it's forgotten the pain, but because it's remembered the possibility. You'll realize love doesn't always arrive wrapped in fireworks and grand declarations. Sometimes it's quieter, softer, like the way they remember how you take your coffee, like the way they hold space for your silence without rushing to fill it, like the way they see your shadows and don't flinch. But healing isn't linear. Some days you'll leap forward, others you'll crumble like sandcastles under cruel tides. And that's okay, that's necessary. Growth is messy. Beautiful things often are. Don't shame yourself for the days you can't get out of bed, for the songs you still can't listen to, for the birthdays you pretend don't matter anymore. Your grief is valid. Your process is yours. Don't let anyone rush your resurrection, because make no mistake, you will rise again. Not like you were, but brighter, wiser, with battle-worn wings that still remember how to fly. You'll wear your past not as a chain, but as armor. You'll become poetry stitched from heartbreak and hope, and people will read you and swear they've never seen anything more human. And even if love finds you late, tired, weary, with a suitcase full of old ghosts, it'll still be worth it. It'll still be real. And this time, you won't lose yourself trying to keep it, because you'll have learned. You'll know that love isn't supposed to feel like drowning while begging someone to throw you a lifeline they never planned to hold. You'll know that love doesn't live in apologies that never come. It doesn't survive on maybes, on what ifs, on next times that never arrive. It thrives in presence, in consistency, in someone showing up for you, not just on the good days, but especially when you're quiet, when you're distant, when you feel like a hurricane barely holding itself together. And maybe, just maybe, they'll sit in the wreckage with you, not trying to clean it, not demanding you smile, but simply holding your hand as the dust settles. And you'll realize that healing didn't just lead you back to love, it led you back to yourself. And isn't that the most heartbreaking kind of beautiful? To come home to yourself after searching for belonging in people who couldn't even hold your name without trembling. To finally understand that love was never about being chosen by someone else. It was about choosing you again and again, especially when you were the hardest to love, especially when you weren't sure you deserved it. There will be days when that revelation feels like a soft breeze against your bruised soul, and other days when it hits like a freight train full of memories you thought you'd buried deep enough. You'll remember the nights you stayed up just to be the last one to let go, the way you memorized every inch of a person who couldn't even remember your favorite song. You'll remember the ache in your chest the first time they looked at you like a stranger, and how you smiled anyway, hoping they'd remember the version of you they used to love. But you'll also remember how you survived, how you carried your own heart through fire and frost and found a way to keep it beating, how you learned to build joy out of scraps, laughter out of loneliness, how you stood in front of a mirror, shattered but still standing, and whispered, "I'm trying," until it became a victory cry instead of a plea. No one tells you that healing is grief in slow motion, that it's not just mourning who hurt you, but who you were when they had your heart. There's a kind of death in letting go of the dream, of releasing the version of the future you painted with trembling hands and hopeful eyes. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still rising, still reaching for the light like a sunflower through cracks in concrete. And one day, though it won't be dramatic, it won't be set to a soundtrack or tied with a cinematic bow, you'll feel it, in the way you stop chasing closure from people who were never brave enough to give it, in the way you stop romanticizing the ones who couldn't stay, in the way your silence stops being empty and starts being peaceful. That's the moment it shifts. That's when you know you're not healing anymore, you're healed. And it's heartbreaking in its own strange, exquisite way, because you'll realize how much of your life you gave to someone who didn't know what to do with it. You'll mourn the time, the energy, the soft parts of yourself you handed over like offerings, hoping to be loved enough to finally feel whole. And you'll cry, not because you want them back, but because you finally don't, because you deserved more, because you always did. And yet in all that pain, there's power, quiet, steady, earth-shifting power. You'll see it in your own eyes, in the way you've learned to sit with discomfort without trying to numb it, in the way you've learned to hold space for your own heart, to cradle it like something precious instead of treating it like something disposable. You'll find beauty in your own reflection again. Not perfection, no, never that, but something better, something real. And love, when it comes again, and it will, won't feel like a rescue mission. It won't feel like oxygen after drowning. It will feel like a garden you built with your own two hands, blooming in places where only thorns once grew. It will feel like someone choosing you not because they pity your past, but because they see the fire in your eyes and want to warm themselves by it. Because they recognize your softness not as weakness, but as survival, as strength, as magic. They won't need to be your everything. They'll just want to be something honest, something safe. They'll speak the language of your silences. They'll kiss the places your doubts still live. They'll understand that you don't need fixing, just understanding, just consistency, just love that doesn't come with a leash. And maybe it won't be the kind of love that sends fireworks into the sky, but maybe that's the point. Maybe it'll be the kind that lights candles instead, that brews tea when your chest gets heavy, that listens when you don't have the words, that holds your hand through the storms without asking you to explain the thunder. Because you've learned now, a love that costs your peace is too expensive. Love that makes you feel small is not love at all. Love, real love, is the kind that meets you where you are and stays, even when your edges are sharp and your light is flickering. And if you felt the false kind, the hollow kind, the almost kind, then darling, the real thing will wreck you in the softest way possible. So hold on. Hold on through the lonely nights and the what-ifs and the echoes of voices that no longer belong to you. Hold on when the world feels like it's moving on without you, when your friends are falling in love and you're falling asleep with your phone pressed to your chest. Hold on, because the story isn't over. Not even close. This chapter may be slow, but it's sacred. It's where you learn to become the hero of your own narrative. It's where you realize that maybe the love you were searching for was never out there. It was always inside you, waiting to be remembered. And maybe that's the quiet tragedy of it all, that we spend so long searching outside ourselves for the very thing we've been starving for within. We chase lovers who mirror our longing, who feel like home only because chaos was our first address. We call it passion when it's really just familiar pain dressed in prettier words. And we stay again and again, hoping this time will be different. This time they'll choose us, see us, stay for us. But they don't. Not because we're unworthy, but because they were never meant to be the ones. And oh, how cruelly tender that realization is. That the ones you gave your soul to couldn't even hold your hand properly. That you bled poetry for people who couldn't even read between the lines. That your love was an ocean and they only came to drink, never to dive. Still, you loved. With reckless grace, with the kind of hope that should have broken you long ago but somehow kept you going. And there's something heartbreakingly noble in that, in loving when you had every reason not to, in believing in the light even as the world kept dimming it. Don't let anyone ever make you feel foolish for that. Hope is not weakness. Hope is rebellion. Hope is survival. You're learning now that there's a deeper kind of strength in solitude. Not the kind that isolates, but the kind that grounds, that wraps around you like a soft blanket and whispers, you are enough, even here, even now, even alone. And it's lonely, yes. Some nights are silent enough to hear your own heart trying to make peace with itself. But in that silence, you begin to hear yourself clearly for the first time. You'll start noticing the little things. How your laughter sounds when it's real, how you hum when you're making coffee in the morning, how the sunlight feels when it hits your face just right, how peace doesn't roar, it hums. And slowly, you begin to fall in love with your own presence, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. You've earned it. Every scar, every sleepless night, every breath you thought you wouldn't get through, they've brought you here. And the world, it's still spinning, still rushing past. But you no longer feel the need to run to keep up. You walk slower now, more intentionally. You stop to look at flowers without photographing them, to listen to songs without needing them to explain your sadness. You dance in your kitchen with no one watching and cry in the shower without apologizing to the drain. Because this isn't just healing, it's becoming. It's shedding the skin of the person who begged to be loved and stepping into the one who no longer needs to ask. It's rewriting the story where your worth isn't determined by who stays, but by how you stayed. Kind, soft and alive, when life gave you every reason not to be. And when love comes again, and it will, because love always returns to the brave, it won't be a rescue boat to a drowning heart. It'll be two whole people, swimming side by side. No fixing, no saving, just choosing, every day, without conditions, without games. The kind of love that sees your shadow and says, I'll meet you there too. You won't have to shrink yourself to fit into their life. You won't have to ask for the bare minimum and pretend it's enough. They'll show up, fully, and not just for your light, but for your storms too. They'll love you on the days you're quiet, on the nights you overthink, on the mornings you need extra time to feel okay. And the best part? You'll be ready. Not desperate, not afraid, just ready. Ready to receive without sacrificing, to give without disappearing. Ready to be loved, not in pieces, not in parts, but in your entirety. Because you've done the work. You've held your heart through every tremor. You've sat in the ruins and rebuilt yourself brick by shaking brick. And now, you know. You know what it means to stay. You know what it costs to leave, and you know the treasure it is to be found, not by someone else, but by yourself. That is where the magic happens, not in being saved, but in realizing you were never lost. That is where the magic happens, not in being saved, but in realizing you were never lost. You were just waiting for someone to look at you the way you should have always looked at yourself, with awe, with tenderness, with the kind of gentleness reserved for wild things that have learned how to survive the winter. And it's gutting, isn't it? To know that the love you begged for, pleaded for, changed yourself for, was a love you were capable of giving all along, but never gave to yourself. You watered everyone else's garden with a dry throat. You wrote symphonies for people who never stayed long enough to hear the chorus. You made homes and hearts that had eviction notices stapled to the door from the start. And you stayed. God, you stayed. You curled yourself into question marks just to make them feel comfortable in your presence. You dimmed your light so they wouldn't have to squint. You made it easy for them to leave, and then blamed yourself for being abandoned. And no one saw it. Not the way you sat with your phone like it owed you closure. Not the way you rehearsed conversations with the ceiling at 3 a.m., hoping this time they'd understand what you were trying so hard to say. Not the way your hands shook when you texted, "I'm fine," when your world was coming apart at the seams. You became fluent in pretending, a master of silence. You smiled in photos where your eyes looked like haunted houses, beautiful but hollow. They said you were strong, didn't they? As if survival was a compliment, as if it wasn't born from necessity, as if you asked to be this resilient, as if you didn't miss the version of you that believed in forever, the one that hadn't learned yet how love can turn into a ghost while still breathing beside you. But here's the thing, no one tells you. Healing doesn't make the past hurt less. It just makes it hurt differently, quieter, sharper in some places, softer in others. You'll be doing fine, laughing with friends, folding laundry, caught in a song, and suddenly it hits you. They're really gone. And not just gone, but they chose to go. They knew your heart, they tasted your love, and still they left. That breaks something no apology can fix. And yet, here you are, still waking up, still breathing, still reaching for the sun through tear-stained curtains. There's a tragic kind of triumph in that, in continuing, in existing when everything in you once begged to disappear. You don't give yourself enough credit for that, because no one talks about the grief that lingers long after the goodbye. The ghost of a laugh in a crowded room, the scent of them in a shirt you forgot you had, the photos you can't delete because they're proof it was real, even if only for you. And some part of you still wants to be chosen, still wants to be enough, still wants to rewind the tape and undo the part where they stopped trying. But love isn't a retroactive salvation. You can't unbreak what they shattered with carelessness. You can't resurrect what died while you were too busy pretending it was still alive. You loved them like a prayer, like a promise, and they treated you like a placeholder. That's not your shame to carry. And yes, you still ache. You still flinch at certain songs. You still glance at your phone during storms, wondering if they ever think of you when the sky cracks open. But healing isn't about pretending it never happened. It's about accepting that it did and loving yourself anyway, especially because of it. Because the version of you that loved with abandon, that stayed too long, that believed too deeply, that version was pure, was beautiful, was real. And maybe, just maybe, the real tragedy isn't the heartbreak. Maybe it's how long you believed you were unworthy because of it. And maybe, just maybe, the real tragedy isn't the heartbreak. Maybe it's how long you believed you were unworthy because of it. How long you held the knife they left in your back and tried to carve it into a lesson. How long you wore your pain like a badge, as if hurting deeply somehow meant you had loved better. As if breaking quietly made you more deserving of being put back together. You made excuses for them in your head long after they stopped giving you reasons. You called it timing, called it fear, called it they just didn't know how to love, but deep down you always knew. You always knew. They knew exactly how to love. They just didn't want to love you the way you needed. And that truth is a blade so silent it doesn't even bleed at first. It just burns. You bent until your spine became a staircase for them to climb their way out of the love they said they'd never leave. You turned your chest into a door and told them it's safe here, even as their hands jiggled the lock looking for a way out. And still, you begged them to stay. In your silence, in your over-apologies, in the way you made yourself smaller just so they'd have more room to be indifferent. You gave them so much of your light you forgot what it felt like to not flicker. And maybe that's what hurts the most. Not the leaving, but how long you stayed hoping. Hoping they'd see you. Hoping they'd wake up one morning with a sudden clarity that you were worth fighting for. Hoping they'd remember the way you held them when the world was too loud. But they didn't. They didn't come back. They didn't look back, and you're left holding memories like glass, shattered, sharp, and somehow still beautiful. You bleed every time you touch them, but you can't seem to let go, because they're all you have left. You remember the way they laughed into your neck, the way their name tasted in your mouth before it turned into silence, the way they made you believe, if only for a moment, that you were safe, that you were home. And it wasn't just love that broke. It was the version of you who believed they could be enough if they just tried harder. So you tore yourself into pieces, thinking if you handed them the right one, they'd finally stay. You shrunk, you softened your nose, you drowned your needs beneath a sea of patience and pretended it was peace. But love shouldn't feel like holding your breath. Love shouldn't feel like convincing someone to choose you every single day. Love shouldn't feel like trying to earn what should have been freely given. And now you're left picking up pieces of a person who only ever existed when they looked at you like you mattered. And what do you do with that? What do you do when you don't even recognize yourself outside of their shadow? You mourn. You mourn the person you were with them. You mourn the future that will never be. You mourn the way your heart still flinches at their name, even when your mouth doesn't say it anymore. And in that mourning, something shifts, something raw and quiet and sacred, a kind of rebirth that doesn't ask for permission. It just begins slowly, painfully. You start collecting parts of yourself you forgot were yours. The laugh that isn't forced, the quiet that feels like calm instead of loneliness, the way your own name sounds in your head without being attached to someone else's, and it still hurts. Of course it does. Healing is not romantic, it's not clean, it's not poetic. It's a goddamn war some days, dragging your heart through mud just to make it beat again. But you do it. You keep going, you keep breathing, you keep showing up for yourself, even when all you want is to disappear. Because if no one else does, you do. Because if no one else does, you do. You do. When the weight in your chest feels unbearable. You do when your pillow knows the shape of your tears better than anyone ever bothered to learn. You do when the world keeps spinning, heartlessly, as if it didn't just collapse inside you. You do when their name still echoes through your body like a ghost that won't leave. When their absence feels louder than their presence ever did. When every room feels like a reminder. When every mirror feels like a betrayal. You do, even when you're tired, so tired. Not just the kind of tired that sleep cures, but the kind that seeps into your soul, the kind that makes your bones ache with memories, the kind that makes you question if you'll ever be soft again. You do, even when you're bitter, even when your chest carries more grief than hope, even when you can't remember the last time you smiled without effort, even when love feels like a cruel joke whispered by the universe while you weren't listening. You show up, and it's not pretty, and it's not poetic, and it's not something anyone applauds, but it's real, and that's what matters. It's real when you drag yourself out of bed, not because you want to, but because the silence is starting to scream. It's real when you scroll through your photos and stop at the ones where you looked happy, but now all you see is how hard you were trying. It's real when someone new asks how you are, and you say, "I'm good," but the words feel like a mouthful of glass. You keep going, not because it's easy, but because there's a part of you, some small, broken, stubborn part that refuses to let them be the ending. They don't get to be the ending. They don't get to be the last chapter in your book. They don't get to walk away with all the good parts of you, leaving you with nothing but rubble. They don't get to be the fire and the ashes. You were here before them. You will be here after them. You are still here. You, bleeding, aching, surviving, you are still here. And yes, it hurts. It hurts when love becomes memory. It hurts when forever turns into a timestamp on a deleted text thread. It hurts when someone you once called home starts to feel like a haunting. It hurts when you're the only one still grieving a relationship they already moved on from. It hurts when you hear they're happy now. It hurts when you realize you were just a chapter and they were your entire story. But this pain, it's not proof that you were weak. It's proof that you loved. You loved deeply, you loved vulnerably, you loved without holding back, and that is not something to be ashamed of. That is not something to regret. You loved like it mattered, and it did matter, even if they didn't see it, even if they didn't stay. And no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense how someone can hold your soul in their hands and still choose to drop it. It doesn't make sense how someone can promise forever and mean it for a moment and forget it by morning. It doesn't make sense how someone can take your light, your laughter, your loyalty, and still walk away like you were just a detour. But here's what does make sense. You're still here. You're still loving, even if it's hesitant. You're still hoping, even if it's quiet. You're still healing, even if it's slow. You're still worthy. You're still worthy. You're still worthy. Not because they stayed, not because they saw your value, not because they came back, but because you are you. Because you are the ache that never gave up. Because you are the love that stayed, even when everyone else left. Because you are the hands that picked up the shattered pieces and whispered, "We'll try again." Even when it hurt, even when it bled, even when your heart felt like a cracked window barely holding back the storm, you still stayed for yourself. When they didn't, when they forgot, when they found comfort in someone else's arms while you were still trying to breathe through the silence they left behind. You stayed, and that matters, that counts, that saves, because the truth is, you weren't too much, you weren't too sensitive, you weren't asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong person to give you something they never learned how to hold. It wasn't your fault, it was never your fault. You didn't scare them away with your softness. They ran because they didn't know what to do with a love that didn't come with conditions. You gave them a place to rest, they gave you a place to break, and now you're here. Trying to rebuild with hands that still remember the shaking, trying to smile with lips that still remember their name, trying to breathe with lungs that still carry the weight of their absence. And it's hard. It's hard when healing doesn't look like light. It's hard when healing looks like rage, when it looks like screaming into pillows, when it looks like leaving the party early because the music reminds you of the night they said, "I love you," like they meant it. It's hard when the world keeps turning and yours is still stuck in the moment they let go. You find their ghost in the most unexpected places. In the back of your closet, in a shirt that still smells like the night they held you like you were the only thing that made sense. In a coffee shop song that echoes like their goodbye. In the laugh of a stranger that sounds almost, but not quite, like theirs. And suddenly, you're falling apart in public again. Pretending your eyes are just dry. Pretending you're okay, pretending your chest isn't full of splinters every time someone says their name in passing. No one warns you how long it stays, how grief doesn't have a timeline, how love lost becomes a bruise you carry in your soul, how some nights all it takes is a smell, a song, a dream, and you're right back there, waiting, wishing, bleeding, and still you rise, still you get up, still you love. Because that's who you are. You're the kind of person who doesn't give up on people, even when they give up on you. You're the one who answers texts at 2 a.m., who stays on the phone even when your voice is breaking, who loves with everything, even when you know how much it'll hurt. And that's beautiful. That's devastating. That's real. And one day, someone will see that. Someone will look at you and get it. They'll see your cracks and call them constellations. They'll hear your silence and know it means please, stay. They'll touch your hand like it's something sacred. They'll kiss you like they're saying, "I'm not going anywhere." And you won't have to beg. You won't have to shrink. You won't have to earn it because they'll love you the way you always deserve to be loved. Completely, bravely, without fear. But even before they come, even if they never do, you are still enough. You are still worthy. You are still here. And that is everything. You survived what you thought would kill you. You made it through nights you thought would swallow you whole. You kept going when the pain begged you to stop. That is strength. That is power. That is grace. You became your own home. You became your own savior. You became the person you kept wishing someone else would be for you. And no one can take that from you. Not the one who left. Not the one who couldn't love you right. Not the memories that still sting when the world gets quiet, because you're not broken, you're becoming. And the pain? The pain just proves you felt something real, that your love was not hollow, that your heart is still beating, still soft, still capable of starting over, capable of joy again, capable of laughing so hard you forget what it was like to cry over them. There will be mornings that don't feel heavy. There will be nights where the silence feels like peace instead of punishment. There will be days where you walk past your reflection and think, I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of the person who stayed when it hurt, the person who stayed when no one clapped, the person who stayed when love left. So take your time, take all the time you need. Let your heart be messy. Let your grief come in waves. Let your love remain wild. Because even in the ruin, you are radiant. Even in the ache, you are art. Even in the silence, you are still here, still whole, still worthy, still you, always you. And that has always been enough.